All right, here we go for office hours. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. I'm Julian Zelizer. This is the long view, and it's great to see and be with all of you. Let's see a couple things. My column on foreign policy, I hope that you might take a look at it, just came out. It focuses on Senator William Fulbright, Arkansas senator who launched hearings in 1966 about the Vietnam War very early on, before there was a full blown anti war movement. And I look at how Fulbright, who had been an architect of the war, the Gulf Tonkin resolution, turns into an important critic and triggers a lot of kind of mainstream concern, which will then transform the nature of the debate. It's about what Congress can do when it has the will, courage, and interest in actually handling its responsibilities. And I talk about it in the context of what we're seeing today. So take a look at that. And I will talk about that in the classroom, which I'm going to do a little later today for paid subscribers. And my newsletter is coming out tomorrow about a play that I saw on Broadway on my birthday, which was really, really good, Liberation, and it has a political theme. So my newsletter is on that. Look for that to drop tomorrow. And Friday, as of now, I have 3 guests coming for live conversations. Jim Acosta is going to join me, and we're going to talk about the news media, the state of the news media, and how things have been changing, including his own career and lifetime. John Alter and I will be doing Then and Now. And finally, a political scientist who some of you might be familiar with. She's terrific. Suzanne Mettler at Cornell has a really, really good book on the rural urban divide in American politics. And she's going to be joining me. She's the co author to discuss the book. So I'm really excited about the week ahead. A lot of interesting material. And for anyone who is new to office hours, the great thing is I am now seeing week in and week out familiar names. Please just send your questions or thoughts on the message on the bottom. And I'm really no agenda on this. Thank you for the sweater. It was a birthday gift last week. So thank you. But send in any comments or questions, and I'm happy to address what is on your mind and how you're feeling about the state of politics and where things might go, or any elements of history that you have. Some of you wrote me about the from the history books. I put out a post on Friday from one of the most damaging scandals from President George W. Bush's presidency, the revelation. Hello, Gail. And I hope everything's good in Idaho, of the use of torture at the Abu Ghraib facility in Baghdad. And I wrote a piece. It was interesting. It triggered a lot of email and a lot of memories about that. That was a story that was broken on 60 Minutes too, when it happened. And it happened in 2004 at a time when President George W. Bush was still quite strong politically. And I don't know how many of you out there remember. The images were absolutely horrendous, of torture, of sexual humiliation, and more. And initially, why it was interesting was initially it was treated and presented as a kind of one-off. Rogue soldiers in the facility had done this. But gradually, what would become clear over time is this went all the way to the top, and that this had been part of a defense policy. The legal counsel of the White House had written some memos supporting. John Yoo was the architect supporting what was called enhanced interrogation. And it was just an amazing kind of story to look back on. I think it's very important. And obviously, what triggered it were the debates about the shooting of the boats now. And the Pentagon has tried to distance itself from what's now being called the double tap. And so, anyway, I wrote about how often these come from systematic policies. They're not often just a one-off or something rogue. Obviously, a lot of tragic news this weekend, really horrendous, both in Brown University and in Australia. One, we don't know kind of what happened, but I do obviously know many people over there at the university, and really a horrendous shooting. And I know many students there are quite traumatized from the experience. Incredible reading in the paper. I think there were two students, I might be wrong, who had already been through gun shootings when they were younger in high school, and here they are at university, obviously never imagining this can happen twice, and here they are on a campus that did. We'll find out more, and the just horrible anti-Semitic murders in Australia, and obviously the bravery of the person who brought it to an end, that fruit vendor. Just a lot of tragic news. And Rob Reiner, who's one of the I don't know how many of you are Rob Reiner fans out there. Very sad. Looks like he was and his wife were murdered. His son, I think, was just taken into custody. One of the great filmmakers, classic films like Harry Met Sally and Spinal Tap, and just a lot. It was a weekend where really many horrible things. And yes, Marina, on Hanukkah. Just a horrible feeling. Let's see. That's a good question, and I'll go first to Marina and then to Trisha. Marina, yes, he actually Rob Reiner. Since this is a historical slash political Substack, there is a connection. He was a very strong, for those of you who knew him, a very famous and very active person in the world of politics. He was a huge figure on same sex marriage when that push happened, very involved as a contributor, as a voice. He was a voice on many progressive causes, freedom of the press, gun control, much more. And by all accounts, I met him once at an event, but by all accounts, he was very genuine in his commitment. And beyond being a nice person, he was not someone just doing this for the kind of role of doing it as a celebrity, but really very, very committed. So yes, he found a way to translate celebrity to public service, which is a topic I have really interesting topic, frankly, historically, how this has happened. So tragedy all around. Of course, his father was one of the great comics from that early Cold War era, Carl Reiner. Was with Mel Brooks and at the forefront. You saw the long view I had. David Margolick, who wrote a book about Sid Caesar, just came out in television, a heyday. So, a horrible day for the Reiner family, and very tragic loss for all of us. Trisha, you asked about what are countries doing to bring things together. I mean, I don't know the specifics of what we're seeing in other countries. I think what you're pointing to, though, uh, I'm not so young, Lynn, but thank you. I take that as a compliment. Is some of this division, the more you study these divisions we're seeing here, rural versus urban, populist, a kind of conservative populism, anti-immigration, nativism, a lot of these divisions are actually playing out in many different countries. They're manifesting themselves in party politics. Obviously, the political system and a parliamentary system is very different than our two-party winner takes all system. But the first thing we have to realize in this shooting, kind of with the shooting itself, driven by anti-Semitism, this is playing out globally, these tensions. And it's no longer a problem contained in one country at all. And I think a lot of social scientists have spent time trying to reckon with why is this taking place in so many different places, different cultures, different ethnic and social makeups, and yet you see at some level commonalities in the fault lines that are dividing American politics. And I don't know what other countries are doing. I mean, one question you want to ask, and this is a historical question, is do other countries have stronger civic institutions to try to ameliorate some of the tensions? I've spoken about this here, the decline and weakening of civic institutions, which is a trend we've seen since the 50s. Best book on this is by Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone. I think the diminished civic institutions has diminished the space that exists outside of partisan politics. And I'm not someone who believes, that partisan divisions are going to lessen very much. So you have to figure out, how do you have those continue? Um, um, Yes, it was an economics, class, Lynn, but I saw it. Look, let's see what happens, and we'll hopefully find out more about Brown. Anyway, on division, so one very concrete, I think, project internationally, and it would be great if there's international comparative data, is how do the health of civic institutions in different countries impact, how these tensions play out? And do they actually ameliorate or lessen the intensity of the divisions rather than the divisions itself? You'll hear from Suzanne Mettler in terms of the rural urban divide. One of her findings, which I think is very important, is often the policy differences in the United States, hi Don, are not as great as the kind of what are called affective feelings. The anger and distrust of the other party are actually much greater than the measures we see on the policy differences. And so you need institutions to push against that. Secondly, obviously, leadership really matters. I think internationally, we're seeing different leaders try different strategies. Here in the United States, we have a president who fuels the divisions. And you could take a look. I don't need to read it. His post just now about Rob Reiner is a case in point about how he responds. Sorry, excuse me. And so I think civic institutions, leadership, and this doesn't mean leaders have to ignore or not represent differences in American politics, but part of the job of the president historically, even when doing this, to be aspirational and push against the worst angels of American politics, and or to aspire to the better angels of American politics. And I think we are not seeing that right now, and I don't think, it's insignificant. So, leadership, civic institutions, and finally, I do think, and it's not gonna happen now, and I don't know what other countries are doing. Thank you, Gene. But I also think there will be a reckoning in terms of how our politics works and reforms of our politics. We've had this in the 1970s after Watergate was one of the most vibrant eras of political reform. Not all of them worked. Some failed, some were disbanded, but it was a time we had disclosure rules. We had campaign finance rules. We changed the way Congress worked. We took a hard look as a country at the rules of the game, at the processes. Even journalism changes during that period. That's the rise of investigative journalism that came out of Watergate. And we changed the institutions to deal with the problems of that era. Same, the progressive era in American history. During the early 1900s, you have sweeping procedural reforms, kind of efforts to curtail the power of parties, for example, on civil service appointments. You have the direct election of senators during this period. You'll have women's suffrage, also campaign finance. So you need periods in American history, and they're far and few between, where we look at that. So those are three areas in terms of, again, Tricia, not getting rid of the tensions. I don't think that will happen, nor do I think that is necessarily what we should focus on. There are genuine differences. But in terms of having institutions and people guide and contain those kinds of tensions in a functional way within our mainstream political processes, and also to find areas where there can be common experiences and common interactions and social contact that aren't just in politics. I do think though there has to be, when I'm talking about leadership, it's not simply saying we need leaders who speak more calmly or who focus on like Obama, meaning he aspired and believed, even though he understood America was red and blue, that his job was to push in a different direction. But I think, other professions are going to have a reckoning too, and so I think the legal profession is done. It's a fair point. I think it's varied. I think, look, a lot of the legal profession has been working hard to maintain stability at this period. For all the law firms that initially accepted the terms that the administration insisted on, which most agreed were just should not be accepted, were not tolerable. Many have fought. I've talked about district judges here. I think have been working really hard to challenge what the administration is doing, to also slow them down. So there's good pockets, but I do think, look, it's kind of the Trump effect is to expose weaknesses in so many of our institutions that were there for a long time, but because no leader of that significance had exploited them, now become very apparent. And the second is how people have reacted to these moments in terms of when guardrails are falling down. Some have acted well, some have not. And I think these will be questions. I think there's a lot of questions in the media for sure about how some elements and some parts of the media have been more than willing to work with the administration, to accept the terms of the administration. Others have not. So I think, Don, those ethics questions are going to be front and center. I don't think the Federalist Society will be reckoning very much because I think they have been very clear since 1982 when they formed exactly what they aim to do. They've achieved what they aim to do. And now they have a court that supports what the Federalist Society just dreamed of back in the early 1980s. And yes, Marina, I think, civic institutions were, Tocqueville wrote about this. They're always extremely important. The book Putnam, Bowling Alone, was about bowling leagues. And it was about bowling leagues, but it wasn't about bowling leagues. And the point was, in our kind of moments such as the 1950s and 60s, where there were lots of tensions and divisions, you had civic spaces where people were interacting regardless of their politics. And sometimes we dismiss that as, okay, that's not as important as what are we seeing from Washington. But on daily experiences, I think it's very, very pertinent. And I don't know where everyone here and kind of remembers from school. I went to high school, public high school in the 1980s. And I remember very clearly, I was not an athlete at the time, but many of my friends were. And it was always remarkable that athletics and the sports teams were often a place where you saw the kind of social interaction that didn't take place in that era outside sports. There was a lot of segregation at the time, a lot of really ethnically based divisions. It wasn't always explicit, it was what you saw in the lunchroom. Sports was totally different. And so I think these are what we're talking about. There's a huge range. Religion, I think, religious institutions, one of the great functions they can serve is this as well. So, anyway, I think it's a good point. Look, I think all the independent media outlets that exist have been doing a pretty good job. I'm continually impressed by the number of voices that I am able to hear and the freedom that these platforms provide. And I remain optimistic that someone asked about kind of these platforms. And I very much hope they continue to do what they are doing, and they're doing very well. Because I think, despite the cynicism, many people feel extraordinarily cynical. And the answer when you talk about the problems of the media often is, well, no one cares. And that's what they want. So that's what they get. And I just don't believe that. And I think it really gets the dynamic wrong. Historically, when the media, presents stuff of good value and does it in an interesting way, audiences then build around that rather than vice versa. And too often today, we talk about demand-based product, and I don't think that's really the story. I mean, you could think of television. When television really spreads, it's in the 1950s. TV comes on the scene around 1948. it starts expanding, and it's in 52, 53. A significant number of homes have television. And early on, you have some news, not a lot of news, but you have like Edward R. Murrow as I think one of the most interesting figures of the time, who has several shows. Some are more entertainment, but he also crafts with See It Now, a television show that is extraordinarily powerful, and it culminates when he takes on Senator Joseph McCarthy in an effective way. The nightly news will think of how to do what they do really in the early 60s. That's when it comes together. But the point is, it's not as if everyone knows what a good product is. Part of the job of the institution is to create one and then do it in a way that will be attractive. So I think on independent media, and I mean, look, I'm a small player, but I'm trying to do what I can to show you can have serious, thoughtful, big picture news analysis that people enjoy. And I think on these platforms so far, the answer to the question is many people are doing that, which is a good time. I'll take my normal break. Thank you for everyone who's tuning in. Thank you for all my subscribers. And this is the challenge of this is it's not an institution, even though it's on one. It's the individual. So thank you to subscribers, my paid subscribers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're letting this happen, and you're kind of giving me what is necessary so I can keep giving you good content. And for those who are not paid subscribers, let me just make a quick appeal. If you consider changing to a paid subscription, that really is a game changer for allowing this all to happen. And I do suggest maybe thinking of giving a subscription to a gift, especially high school or college student who's in your family or friends, because those it's always a pleasure to reach that cohort, but it can make a nice gift in the holiday season. Okay, so thank you, Francis. Yeah, that's a really interesting. So, Francis raises the relationship between the Federalist Society and President Trump. Obviously, when President Trump was first elected, his connection to the Federalist Society was very close. You remember he produces a list of people he will nominate to the federal court that was literally drafted by Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society. And it's part of what Trump did was to appeal to new parts of the electorate and conservative coalition, but also very traditional ones like the Federalist Society. Those tensions have grown because many of the judges who come out of that very conservative, originalist mentality have been some of his critics because they are viewing a president who is treating the law the way that he does. So I think you're seeing the president has shifted. Many of his appointees are much more radical in certain ways than even Federalist Society appointees. They're less institutionalist. I think that's the key. And thank you, Reba. I really appreciate that. I'm trying hard. I think it's interesting. With the courts, he had still been President Trump. Tolerance the wrong word, but interested in working with institutionalist conservatives, if that makes sense. And I know there's a lot of criticism on that because many people are critical of the entire idea of originalism. But let's just take that there is a kind of group, very conservative, but still believe in the institution, still believe in working within that system, which I do think originalists did to push things toward a very conservative place, who believed in a code of ethics. And now you're seeing a radicalization of the picks where it's being decoupled from that. And you're getting really loyalists, pure loyalists, not to an idea, but to the president who are being nominated. And I think that could have a huge shift in the courts, but we will see. Again, midterms are coming up. He is certainly struggling, President Trump, and I think Democrats, and we'll talk about this with Suzanne, have a lot of things that they can do. I don't know if it's the last office hours. I have a lot of energy, and I'm taking a little break from my foreign policy columns just for a couple weeks, but I'm going to try to keep doing this because I really like to hear. I'm sure the crowd might be a little smaller, but I think I'm going to still do it. So I will be around. Thank you so much, everyone. And again, thank you for your support of the Long View. And I'm going to try to, paid subscribers, I'm going to try to do in the classroom a little later today and talk about Senator William Fulbright, which I wrote about in the foreign policy piece. Thanks, everyone. Stay healthy and stay warm. Bye bye.